Seeking the truth never gets old, even when it hides in the shadows. Immerse yourself in the world of June's Journey, a free-to-play hidden object game set in the roaring 20s. Solve the mystery of the devious gossip spreader and celebrate our 7th anniversary with exclusive events, never-before-seen decorations, thrilling mysteries, and exciting giveaways. The adventure and the gossip awaits. Are you ready for the journey? Download June's Journey today for free on Android or iOS.
Okay, we're back with Ken and Mike for another installment of My Uncle's Escaped Alcatraz. Hey guys, so lots of stuff going on. We've had a lot of interesting guests over the last few weeks. We had Mike, who did some work on the photograph on almost like an analog digital, a little bit of digital thing, and he verified that photograph. Then we had Amro, who I was completely blown away with the stuff that this guy's doing as far as that. And he was kind of surprised. I thought it was interesting. And then about that there's still people questioning what's going on here. And I thought that was interesting. And then we had Lenny DePaul, the retired commander of the U.S. Marshals. And he provided another kind of federal perspective. And he's also very good friends with Art. So he's actually, I spoke to him today and he says he's going to talk to Art about this and try to find out some more information. So hopefully we'll get some information from that way. And also, you know, if you're listening, we'd love to have you back on the podcast, kind of discuss your thoughts about the book. And because I know you've had some exchanges with Ken about the book, and I'd love to hear what you felt the book is. Because like I said, I mean, everybody that we've given the book to, I mean, they read it so quickly. And it's a page turner. It's just like they can't believe all the stuff that's going on. And so I think that's interesting. So I'm going to send the book to Lenny too, to see what he thinks on. But, you know, it's as we know, we're still kind of looking into that whole background of down in Brazil and seeing that. And hopefully hopefully have some news for you soon. We got some new people working on it, which is great. And so just wanted to start off with you, Ken, and just get your thoughts on, first, let's talk about Mike. So Mike and his...
Mike, not me. Mike Street.
Mike Street. Yeah, Mike Street.
Don't want to confuse people.
Yeah, so Mike Street, who did some work on the photograph. So what'd you think of what he said, and what was your reaction?
You know, I would say out of all of the guests that we've had so far, Michael Street has always been the person that fascinated me the most, was because, you know, he was the first person to ever really kind of analyze the photograph. In 2015, when History Channel hired him to look at this photograph, I mean, he did it the old-fashioned way. I mean, he did it the way that a law enforcement today or back then would do it. And, you know, he took the latest software at that time, which was actually something he wrote, and he analyzed that photograph. And I mean, he saw it right off the bat. You know, it didn't take him long to come back and say, yeah, that's a positive match on John. And so to me, I've always held a lot of credibility to him, just because he didn't have the AI technology that we have today. But yet he was still able to see that photograph, and he was able to see that there was a match between that photo, the person that we thought was John, and another photo of John. So I was really glad to hear him say it outside of a TV show. So.
Yeah. And I mean, he was pretty confirmed. He didn't seem there was much doubt in that.
Yeah, that's what I really struggle sometimes for people who will come back and question the credibility of the photo. You know, I've actually had people question me and say, well, you know, the photo has been altered in some way or photoshopped. And, you know, I reminded them, even though there was, you know, they had the ability to alter photos back in 1975. I mean, very few people had access to it. I mean, your normal everyday person like Fred Breezy, I mean, pretty much was like how I used to do it when I, you know, had a film to develop. You took it down to your local drugstore and you dropped it off, and it got sent off to Kodak, and then it came back, it developed. So I mean, he didn't really have the ability to alter that photo. And then I've actually had people look at the photo and tell me it has not been altered in any way. So I still to this day don't understand why some people, it's mainly in certain law enforcement, and really, I guess maybe only two U.S. Marshals that have looked at the photo and start questioning, like, I'm not sure that's them. There's other ways to look at the photo and do matches. But yet when you look at and you talk to all the professionals, they look at it and say, no, that's actually John Anglin in that photo. And I was just shocked and blown away how some people come back and even find an even stronger match with Clarence. I've always thought John was the stronger match.
Yeah.
I mean, even Clarence has a really strong characteristics in that photo that matches his other photos. So yeah, I'm just very happy with it.
To me, it's the fact that the person who took the photo that gave it to your family was connected to them.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing. It's not like someone just found a random photo. That photo was given to your family by Fred Breezy.
Yes. And, the strange thing about that is that none of the family members at that time really knew what he was giving them. I mean, he never once told them this is John and Clarence. I mean, he did tell them that he was down in Brazil. He was at their farm. He was staying with them. He told them about the children. He told them about him and John and Clarence driving off in their pickup truck, going around their farm and snapping photos. And I mean, he talked about a lot of things, but he never really actually said that's John and Clarence. He basically gave these photos to Uncle Man, who was there sitting right beside him. And Uncle Man, according to my mom, looked at her and said, no, I want you to have it, Marie. That's my mom's name, Marie. He said, I want you to hang on to these photos. I was like, for the longest time, I remember looking at those photos, many, many times. And I never really put those two men together until I started doing some really digging into it. And I had the FBI files, and I started reading the description of John and Clarence and their height and their weight. And then I was like, why in the world would Fred Breezy give my mom or the family a picture of two men that they had no clue who it was? At some point in time, they were going to figure out who these two men were.
Yeah, after he had just told them he was down there and he was visiting them.
Yes. So, I mean, it was just, I really believe he was trying to tell the family something without really kind of putting them in jeopardy. Because you got to remember now, in 1992, I mean, it's still only 20 years since the escape. So they were still alive. The FBI, the U.S. Marshals were still looking for him, hot and heavy. They were still investigating the family. They were still listening to their phone calls. So, I can understand why he was very kind of holding back a little bit about telling them certain things. I think he wanted them to find it later. And we did. So.
Yeah. What do you think, Mike? What was your reaction to Mike Street's his statements?
Well, I actually want to talk about Amro and Lenny, because I think they said two different things that sort of backs up what Michael Street was saying.
Okay.
I like the idea that we have two different forensic investigators who specialize in identifying people in photographs, for the law enforcement community to try to either confirm this is who we're looking for based on previous photographs or identifications, and then you can zero in on a suspect if you're going to arrest them or so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And with Amro, I mean, obviously he's not law enforcement, Lenny is, but he approached it from a very scientific digital approach where they digitize the photographs and rather than measuring the height of a forehead or the cheekbones or the chin shape kind of a thing, they assign numbers to a face. And then they took the 1,000 random photographs of Brazilian men who are alive in the mid 70s and ran a comparison of the Breezy photograph with 1,000 other photographs to see if there's any kind of built-in bias into the program, because they did an initial of this is their result for the initial, and then they compared it to the 1,000 other photographs to give it a large sample, and the numbers came out essentially the same as what they said. It was a 99 point, I think he said 5%, and we heard 99.7, but still a very, very high accuracy of compared to known photographs of John and Clarence, especially John, that it's exactly the same. It picked that photograph twice, both independent, that it was just the one, and then, compared to 1,000, that, they digitized everything. It's just numbers. It's just whatever number they assign, that's the number that's on the different parts of the face. So it's the more numbers you have, the higher, the less of a probability of getting a match, because, it's like winning the lottery. It's 300 million to 1 if you play the lottery, because, you have, the more numbers you have, the harder it is to win. It's the same thing with the photograph. The more digital, points you have, the harder it is to match someone. So when you get a match, it's a very, very high probability that that's the same person as a known photograph. And of course, his essentially comes really close to 100%, as close as you can get. And in a previous conversation with Amro, he said you never get 100%. The highest you can ever hope for is 99.7. Because it's, the comparisons are not going to be perfect, but they're going to be real close. And to us to get a 99.5, 99.7 is about as high as you're going to get. Yeah. And the second thing that Lenny said that I thought was interesting was, he is a retired U.S. Marshal, so he is an investigator, and he did use this technology of facial recognition, but he said he didn't just use that. That's not the only tool that they have. They also look at other characteristics in a photograph that help them confirm or eliminate people as, potential suspects or the ones they're looking for. And we kind of touched on it a little bit, where, like Ken said, you look at the photograph. Well, Clarence was a little bit taller than John. Clarence was about 5'11", John was 5'10". Mm-hmm. And in the photograph, Clarence is a little bit taller than John. Clarence had dark hair. Clarence had blonde hair. John had blonde hair. And that's what's in the photograph. So those two things match. Of course, you can change your hair color, but it is a match. Another thing that was a match was the way that John wore his watch on his left wrist, not on the wrist, but more on the forearm, which is very unusual. And we have a photograph of John taken years before that. He has the watch on the exact same way on his forearm, not on his wrist, on his left arm. The way Clarence is standing, he stands kind of hunched over a little bit. His arms hang to the side away from his body. It's not it's not touching. And his hands are both kind of curled. And in the photograph that Breezy gave us, Clarence is standing that way. And then we have other photographs of Clarence standing the exact same way. His posture is identical to Clarence. And then another connection is that Clarence was a smoker. We have photographs of Clarence who used to put his cigarettes in his left shirt pocket. And we have in the photograph that Breezy gave, you can see the outline of a pack of cigarettes in his left shirt pocket. So each thing is not an absolute identifier, but you put them all together, the more hit points you have, the more you can say they keep intersecting to the same people. That nothing is, it's not like all of a sudden Clarence has purple hair and it's like, that's not Clarence. He doesn't have purple hair. He didn't wear his hair. It's all connecting to them. Nothing is pointing away from them. And then, of course, another hit point you have is in the Fred Breezy tape. He talks about that in the farm, they had the termite mounds. And he said the termite mounds were everywhere. And it was it's a problem for farmers there, and including their farm, that you have to go around these termite mounds when you're farming, because you can't get rid of them. There's just way too many of them. And when Ken and I visited Brazil in the area where we believe that they were in the 70s, there are termite mounds everywhere. All the farms have them, and they're shaped the same way. It's kind of the same kind of color of mud that they had in the photograph. So again, those things keep intersecting to what Fred Breezy said. Or another thing that Breezy talked about was the Chevrolet plant, which is about 20 miles away from Monteiro Lobato. At the time of when the brothers were there, There were only 2 Chevrolet plants in the whole country, one of them 20 miles away that Breezy references, because they would get their equipment from them. And there was another one that was very, very far away from where the brothers were, hundreds of miles away. So you just keep checking the boxes, and it keeps pointing to them based on that photograph.
Yeah, like I've always said, if we took this information into a trial, and we had like a prosecution, we had a defense, and we were prosecuting the fact that this photograph is accurate. There's just too many, and if we had it in front of a jury, the jury would, beyond a reasonable doubt, would say this photograph is authentic. Mm-hmm. There's just too many data points. Not to mention, it'd be different if you didn't have a recorded conversation with Fred Breezy with your family that day, the time that he gave the photograph, just talking about what they were, talking about them being down there. And then on top of that, the fact that he gives that photograph to your family, and that your family has kept it for this many years, and obviously didn't want to reveal this information for a variety of reasons, but the main reason is because they didn't want to get in trouble.
Right.
Right. So that's a secret you keep. Most people keep that secret until they pass on. And someone stumbles upon it. So,
one of the things that Amaro said too really stood out to me. It's kind of odd, is that he said that during the points that they were going to use to do this comparison, is that they took I think it was their mugshot from Alcatraz, mm-hmm. or one of the shots, and they age progressioned the photograph up until the point that it would have been around that same time frame, 1975, and they used that and actually got a hit based upon the photograph. Now, what is so strange is I've seen the age progression photos that the U.S. Marshals have done, and it doesn't even come close to looking like that. So I guess my question is, how is it Amaro is able to age progression a photo, and we see it in this photo, but yet the U.S. Marshals, who are supposed to be so, adapt to being able to find people, can take that same type photo and age progression it, and it doesn't even come close to it. Well, because I've seen the last age progressions that they've done, mm-hmm. and it does not look anything like John.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Amaro did disclose that he does a lot of work for the government. So he does. I don't know whether or not, and like, you're only as good as your technology, as far as in that. So it sounds like he has taken the technology to another level. So that's all you can think of. Maybe when was that the U.S. Marshals age progression done?
They actually came out with an update about 3 years ago. I remember watching it on, I think it was the Today program. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I think it was Art who actually did the interview on either Today or one of the morning news programs. And the U.S. Marshals had just upgraded or updated the age progression photos. But I still, it's almost kind of like, if you ever had this conspiracy theory that they don't want to find them, so they're doing everything in their power to throw off any type of connection whatsoever. First of all, you come out and you say, well, evidence was found in the bay that really wasn't in the bay, and then you come out and you say, well, they drowned, but we don't have any bodies. And so they tell you they don't go to Brazil, but yet they do go to Brazil. And then they come out and they tell you, well, that's not the photo, doesn't match them, but yet every other expert looks at that photo and they find a match to it. And then they come out and they show an age progression photo that doesn't even come close to John and Clarence, but yet an independent person can come out and do an age progression photo and it matches them. So, you tell me, are they purposely trying not to find them?
That was a conversation that I had with Lenny about that, and we talked a little bit about that on the podcast with him, and I don't know. When you're dealing with the government and the political structure of what's going on, as far as, I mean, right now, I mean, if you look at it right now, they can't even get straight the attempted assassinations on Trump right now. I mean, it's just
Well, that's true
the
too.
level of misinformation in this day and age when we have information at our fingertips at like lightning speed, and the amount of data that they can control in an area is just insurmountable. And even, Lenny was telling us that too. He says, listen, he goes, the tools that we have now, no one can hide. No one
Well,
can hide.
I'll say this: if there's any FBI or U.S. Marshals that watch the show, give me and Mike and Rob the information that we need. Give us the whole complete information. We'll solve this case for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, obviously, I think everybody has a, stake in the curiosity of figuring this thing out. And that's why I find it, a little perplexing when, when Rod is, holding, or not Rod, Rod, or Art, I should say. Art is being kind of, I don't know, it's almost like playing a little cat and mouse game.
Yes.
And it's being very not specific. I mean, because like I said, there's nothing here to gain. There's nothing here really to lose, unless there's something in there. And, I know one of the things I was asking Lenny, I know, because Art is probably still in some capacity on advisory way, is probably working with the U.S. Marshals on a variety of things as a retired U.S. Marshal. So he may not be able to say. He may be able to, honestly kind of give us what's going on. But,
but at this point in time, over 60 years, what is there to hide?
I know.
I mean, if he's actually working with them, or if he knows something that, you can't tell anyone, what in the heck? I mean, we're talking about three escapees from prison. Yeah. We're not talking about someone who went out and assassinated a president. We're talking about three individuals that escaped from prison. So, I mean, what is it that they're trying not to share with us? I mean, why would you not give us, at this point in time, or make it to the public, every single thing about this case?
Because they don't have to. They don't have to. And it's like in their minds, I think it creates
the power game.
And also it may, they don't want to set a precedence.
Yeah.
That may be an issue, because if they give it to you, then they're going to have to open up the files for other things. But, there's been a lot of files that people have been trying to get a hold on. And, I just got done finished editing and producing this UFO doc, and it was crazy. It was crazy in how they created the whole Roswell thing it's all a big misinformation campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And they fed this poor man who was a scientist who lived near the area where they're doing the testing, and he started seeing all these lights and stuff like that. So he started, he's a scientist, so he started recording it on film. And back then, like you said, there was nothing he could do with it. He had to send his film out to Kodak to get it developed, so there was no way that he could alter the film.
Right.
And so he had proof of that, and then he went to, and then he created this monitor through his computer and through radio waves to kind of monitor the energy of him. And he handed this all to because he had done some work for the military base anyway. So he was like, hey, listen, he presented it to them and said, listen, this is what I'm finding here. And then so what they did is they assigned him basically an agent who was going to basically said, yeah, you're right. This is all very strange. And said, let me see what you got. And so they started feeding him information, and it was misdirected information. And it was all misdirected, and they were curating it, and they actually were beaming signals. They gave him this computer, and they said, listen, use this computer. And they were using that computer to kind of beam in information to his computer to make him more think that he's more in the know and that he has more evidence on this thing. And this went on for years. And they just kept on just adding more stuff and creating more misinformation. And then they had a journalist attached to it, and he thought it was real. And we're talking like 15, 20 years they were using all this information, a lot like what's going on right now. And it was all fake.
Well, I do find it also strange is that we bring in someone like Stewart, who is a former FBI agent, and we show him everything that Mike and I have uncovered and found, and he's blown away, and he's like, yes, I totally believe it. He could see all the pieces that we've shown. You bring in someone like Lenny, who has not been involved in this case, and he sees the exact same thing. He sees overwhelming, compelling evidence that, yes, they made it all the way down to Brazil. But then you bring in the 2 U.S. Marshals that have been directly involved in this case. You're talking Art and you're talking Michael Dykes. Both of those individuals are the only 2 that are coming back and trying to destroy this or discredit this photo in anything that we find. So what I find very amazing is that you take law enforcement individuals that have never been involved in this case, and they see the evidence. You take someone who has been involved in this case, and they're either trying to cover it up or they're purposely trying to direct us away from what we're trying to bring forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
Tell me why that's the case.
I don't know. And I don't know, but someone like Stewart, who has worked for the government his entire life, his adult life, and who also knows how the government works, because he was also telling me about some of the things that he knows about the JFK assassination and stuff that doesn't hold water on that as well. So he knows that governments can be, they can spoon feed information, they can whitewash information, and if they don't want you to know something, they're not going to want you to know. And unfortunately, it really hasn't progressed. It really has not changed.
Right.
The level of, and I understand methods and procedures and information is power, but for something like this, I mean, it would be the equivalent of finding, further back, but if you're finding some evidence about ancient Rome, wouldn't you want to know, if you found the whatever the murder weapon that killed Julius Caesar, and you can kind of verify it, and wouldn't you want, and there was ancient scrolls talking about it or something like that, writing, wouldn't you want to know about it? Wouldn't you? I mean, there's really no basis for that, to keep that secret unless there's something else going on. And as we know, the fact that Mickey Cohen was bonded out by Chief Justice Warren, and we had Art on here saying that's never been done before,
right? And
it's never been done since. Right. There's something that doesn't smell right.
Something doesn't hold water. And I've actually tried to get several documents from the FBI through FOIA to have them unredacted and sent to me. One of them they were more than happy to send to me. Believe it or not, it turned out to be a former FBI agent who wrote J. Edgar Hoover a letter, and they gave that to me. But then I turn around and I write a request for the interview that they did with the cellmate of Alfred, and they refused to give it to me because they said it would expose their methods of the way that they collected the information. And I talked to one of the lawyers. I was able to, follow an appeal to it. But I was like, wait a minute, this guy that you're talking to, he's already dead. It's like, so Alfred's dead. The two individuals are already deceased. I mean, you talk to people in jail all the time. What kind of method are you saying that this is going to jeopardize? And they never could say, but they just refused to give it to me.
Well, I mean, obviously something was done that was done unorthodox, and maybe there was something.
Maybe so.
Yeah. And, I mean, because let's just put it this way. I've done a lot of documentaries on prisons. I've spent probably equivalent of 4 or 5 months behind bars, in some of the nation's most craziest maximum security prisons. And I've seen how they operate. And once you go in those walls, number one, once you go inside a prison, you sign your life away. You sign basically releasing the liability of the prison. And literally there's a big bulletin that it'd be like you being taken hostage, we will not negotiate for your life. Everybody has to sign that. Anybody goes in. So, and I had been in quite a few prison yards where there were riots. And so, but, they say that on paper. I mean, if there's they'll try to save you, but when they do cell extractions, and when they're disciplining inmates, there's a lot of things that go on that people don't see.
Mm-hmm.
That that would make you think, all right, this place is really bad. And in the federal prisons, it's even more complicated because no one's allowed in federal prisons. Like, at least they allow cameras in state prisons and stuff like that, and some of them they don't allow them anymore. But in federal prisons, you don't know what goes on behind those walls, as we know, because Jeffrey Epstein kind of just magically died in federal prison, and now you have another high value target, P. Diddy, who he's not even eating his food because he's afraid he's going to get poisoned in there, because so things just happen, and they don't want to. And I think that's just to protect people. And I think when people are sitting on information like this, they're either protecting themselves, the institution, or they just don't want the information out.
And that's another thing, is like one of the newspaper articles that we came across when we were doing our research around Officer Chechi, who is the individual that seized the boat that night.
Yep.
They come. He does an interview for a local newspaper a couple of days later because he's getting harassed by the FBI. And you just figure they're trying to throw him under the bus. Well, in the article, whoever wrote the article not only interviewed him, goes out and interviews William Bennett, who is he's over the federal prisons at that time.
Yeah.
And they also interviewed 2 special agents. And the special agents inside of this article said, yeah, we find this very credible because it backs up the theory that we thought there was a boat involved. So the lower level, or the men and women that was working the case, they see this and they're like, yeah, this is very credible. But then the higher ups in the FBI comes along and goes, no, we're closing this out. We want to make this go away. We don't want to follow this. It's like, what is going on here? Like, why in the world would you just continue to throw things out the door that would have helped this case? And even today, I see it happening, because like I said, we request stuff. I mean, me and Mike, we're just regular, ordinary guys, and we were able to uncover a lot of stuff. But just think about what we could if we had access to all of them.
Yeah, I know. And you guys have been, with your book and everything, I mean, you've been kind of displaying all this stuff out. And I'm sure before the book, there were a lot of people probably thinking, when they saw, a certain percentage, well, they think that you're crazy, that you're coming up with stuff.
Yes.
And, the other person, just relating it to something that's happening today is like, you had all, remember back when Kanye West was talking about P. Diddy and all this stuff, and no one was listening to him and they branded him crazy. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, everything that he said is true.
Yep.
And now it's so true that the government, the Southern District of New York federal government has like an ironclad case against him.
Mm-hmm.
They basically said, we have an ironclad case, because they don't really go after someone unless they know they're going to get a conviction, because they have like some crazy percentage of conviction rate.
Yeah.
So if they're going after you, they're going to come after you. They're going to.
I agree.
So that, to me, it's just like, all that stuff. Why would you walk away from that information, other than, number one, if you're just protecting an institution, or you're protecting people, or if there's something else? I mean, like we were talking about before, it's like that. Just the fact that there's a connection to Mickey Cohen and JFK and Jack Ruby. I mean, there's that whole era. There was a lot of shit going on, that early 60s in the government,
There is too much coincidence between Mickey Cohen, Jack Ruby, Oswald, Candy Bar. Now, you're talking about the Supreme Court justice, the Alcatraz escape. Just all of this occurs within just a year of each other.
Yeah.
And, I don't know why people like the commission, the Warren Commission, they didn't even look into this. I mean, they pretty much, I really believe, just like the Oliver Stone movie, I really believe they already had it in their mind. This is how we're going to write this report.
Yep.
We're not going to look at any other piece of information. They already had it in their mind how they're going to write it. And this is, and that's how it turned out.
Yeah, I know. It's kooky. It's very kooky. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about how this whole thing, and we talked a little bit about it, how has affected your family, Ken, over the years, and how how they feel about now, how they feel about the book, how they feel about Crazy Ken digging up the pad.
Well, there's only really been.
Ken, what are you doing now? Why are you dragging all that stuff out here?
There's only really been 3 books that have ever had a family member involved. The very first one was Don DeNeve, who did The Riddle of the Rock, and he actually worked with all of the living family Anglin members at that time. Uncle Man, my mom, several of the other sisters and brothers that were still alive. And, they gave him as much information as they possibly could. And believe it or not, when they were writing this book, this is about the time that Fred Greasy comes to meet with the family.
Wow.
And in fact, on the tape, he tells them, he says, listen, what I'm about to tell you, do not share with Don. So, and then he goes into talking about the farm, and he goes into talking about, I think that's when he hands them the photos. But that's the reason why those photos were never included in that book. Their very first book. That he told them, do not give this to Don. Do not tell Don what I'm about to tell you.
What year was that? What year was that?
That was in 92.
No.
So the book came out. I think they were still working on it. It came out right after that. But you can hear him on the tape. He said, I do not want you to share this with Don.
Yeah.
So, and then of course we find out later on that Don DeNeve was working with Art Roderick, and he was going to Art after he met with the family each time, sharing any information that they gave him. So, excuse me.
You ask Art about that if that was the case.
Oh yeah. Art admitted to us that he met with Don DeNeve, and he met with him in Jacksonville, Florida. As soon as he would leave the family, he would come up to Jacksonville, and him and Art would sit together, and Art would get all the scoop that they might have told him, which they didn't really kind of. Uncle Man was a very intelligent man. He knew when someone, he knew when to share stuff and when not to share stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they felt like Don DeNeve was going to help them write a book, excuse me, and was going to maybe get their brother's case out into the public, it never really kind of took traction. And so, fast forward up until 2018, Michael Esslinger and my brother, Michael Esslinger wrote a book, and my brother helped him put some photos together for the book. But he writes the book, and he basically, it's more of a historical book about Alcatraz. It does cover my uncles as they, some parts of it. Nothing like what the book that me and Mike wrote. Me and Mike really, this is the kind of book that my mom has always wanted to be written, because all of these stories that she shared with me growing up, all of the stories I heard from my aunts and uncles about John and Clarence, we took those stories and we wrote them into information that we found that I don't even think my aunts and uncles even knew about. Yeah. So, we knew the stories, we knew the history that we found in the evidence throughout newspapers, or even when, stuff we found in the FBI files. So, yeah, once we kind of had all that together, Mike was very good at weaving this together and putting it together. I mean, it's an awesome read. So, yeah. Kudos to Mike.
Yeah, no, it just because it's a page turner and it just sucks you in.
Yeah. So as far as the family members, I've only had a few people that have reached out to me, family members, cousins. There's only 2 sisters still alive. My mom loves it. My aunt loves the book. I've never had any of my cousins say anything negative about it.
Let's just talk about your mom too. What did your mom say about the book? What were some of the things that she really kind of enjoyed about it? And because I'm sure she, it's a huge piece of nostalgia of her family. And
she was shocked at how much it brought memories back for her. She was almost kind of like, it's hard to, she said, I think she even quoted to me, she said, you wrote this as though you were even there, like you were really there. She said, a lot of these things I might not have told you, but you got it spot on. I mean, absolutely. This is how it happened. Like, the way they had their conversations, and like, the way that John and Clarence, when they were very young, they got into fights at school. She said that's exactly how they got treated in school. That the teachers were very down on them because they were so poor, and they were going to a school that had very, nice, influential type students, and they were pretty much like the outcast students. So they were always getting picked on, even by the teachers. And so she was very happy the way me and Mike captured that vision, or that picture. And she said it reminded her a lot of what happened when she was growing up.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was very happy about that. That's was my goal, was to go back and tell these stories that my mom used to share with me, and I heard Uncle Man and other aunts and uncles share with me about what happened with John and Clarence, and them too.
I'm actually hearing this part for the first time. Ken's not shared this with me before about his mother's, specific reaction, and that's really, it's very gratifying to hear that, because obviously we were collaborating together, and he would share the information, he'd share the photographs and tell the stories, and then you're writing a narrative. And we talked about this before, that for Ken, he really wanted to make the people come alive as much as we could. Infuse their personalities and the way they talked and their responses to things. And, you do the best you can. You kind of have to extrapolate and kind of fill in the gaps, because you don't get everything, of course.
Yeah.
And then for her, when she's reading this, it's like, I was there again, and as a writer, you always aim for that. And when you get it, that's a bullseye. And so I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah. It sounds like you channeled it. I mean, because it's like, because it read like someone just telling their family story about their family members.
Yeah, because I was a lot of that history. I wasn't even born yet, so I wasn't there. Yeah, so I was relying upon the way that my mom told me the story, and the way that she would say certain things about how John and Clarence acted, and how Alfred would act, and she would tell me how poor they were, and the things that they had to go through, and things they had to suffer, and how their mom and dad was always so, they had this Christian moral to them. They were trying to do right with their children. And I just took that, and as I would relay it to Mike, there was a lot of times I would write stuff, and I'm not a writer at heart, and Mike would help me rewrite it into the way that I wanted to say it. And it came across. To me, I think it's probably one of the best books I've ever read.
Not that you're biased or anything.
Not that I'm biased.
But yeah, no, I think that it's definitely, I'm sure. The interesting thing about it is that, because you've done it, and you've kind of, based upon everything that we know, I feel like you've broken some new ground based upon these other books that have been written, because I don't think anybody would have had that first level experience and information, because they don't have the access that you have.
No.
And so there's no one can tell the story like someone, like a family member. Right. And, even though, and it's a complete inside look, and the fact that you're a family member, but you really weren't around to experience a lot of this stuff. So you have some objective viewpoint of it, because you have distance from it. And the fact, this still blows my mind, the fact that you really didn't really start digging into this thing until like the 2000s.
Yeah, I was, of course, I was collecting all this information throughout my whole life. It was things that was in my head. And yeah, it wasn't until until 2012 that I really said I need to get this out, because once my mom and my aunt dies and I pass away, I mean,
Yeah.
the story's gone, you
Yeah.
know, and unless we put it into something that's written down, I mean, no one would have ever known the story.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy that Mike convinced me into writing a book.
Yeah. Because you don't want them just listening to art.
No, or the island and the staff out there. You know, if you talk to the the park rangers, they'll tell you right off the bat. You know, they agree with Art and Michael Dykes that they never made it off the island; they drowned.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, and actually our approach for the book, you know, of it's really their life story, John and Clarence's life story from young children, and even before they were born, just kind of going back into a little bit of the family history of where they came from and what they experienced culturally and societally. And then, of course, chronicling their whole life up until, you know, Brazil. When we wrote the book, and then, of course, the next thing we were doing was pitching it to agents to see which one would be interested in representing us, who would then, you know, pitch it to publishers. And we sent out a lot of query letters to the agents, and many times when they would respond, if they responded, sometimes we never heard back from them, but the ones who did, most of the time said, well, what's there to cover? The story's been told so many times, everyone knows the story, there's no new ground. You know, what do you guys have that's different? And we would try to explain, we got everything that's different. It's a completely new look at the escape and who John and Clarence were, and a little bit about Frank Morris too. And you know, when you take a look at it, you'll see what we're talking about. And finally, we obviously were able to convince an agent that said, yes, I think I can sell this because you're telling a new story that we haven't heard before.
Exactly. I mean, it's the same problem we deal with, because full disclosure, we're pitching this to television networks right now, and there have been obviously some other documentaries been done on it, but I think there's definitely a new entry point based upon your book. I mean, obviously, when you did those earlier ones, you didn't have the book. You were still probably, formulating a game plan for the book. So you don't have the level of research that you do now, as far as what's going on. So I think there is definitely another story to tell. And as all, I don't know how many documentaries and books have been written on the JFK assassination or any kind of major event, you can always look at it from a different viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And I think your viewpoint, Mike's viewpoint, is a unique one. Obviously, you're a family member. Your DNA is connected to these two people forever, and it's just interesting to find out that and there are people that are continually to be interested about it. I mean, I think Amro was the one who did the statistics on how many people go visit Alcatraz on a yearly basis, and I didn't realize how many, So it's definitely something that's in the zeitgeist of at least that part of the country, if not the world, and people really they want to know. They want to know what happened. I mean, if someone escaped out of like a maximum security prison and made it to safety and lived on, people would want to know that.
Well, Ken and I, we've been to Alcatraz a couple of times. I've been a couple more times after that. And every time you go to the island, obviously they have to ferry you there across the bay to get to the island. And every single time you go, there's a long line of people, hundreds of people waiting to get on. The boats are big. They're not small boats to transport you to the island. And they're full, several hundred people each. And it's many times every day. And they're all full. You have to, you can't just show up on the morning of and say, we want to go to Alcatraz today. Those tickets are gone.
Yeah.
You have to do it. You have to go online. You have to do it in advance, weeks or months in advance to get your tickets, because they get snatched up. So
yeah,
that the interest is still there. And it's largely because, I believe, because of the escape. That's the
independent of Al Capone being housed there and the escape. What else are you going to talk about?
Well, I can tell you this. the times that I had been to Alcatraz, and the very first time I ever went, I just kind of went on my own. You know, it was like in 2008. And I just kind of grabbed on the boat, you know, rode out there all by myself. And I was shocked at how many people stood in front of John and Clarence and Frank Morris's cell. I mean, yeah, there'll go find Al Capone and other inmates, famous inmates. But the 1962 escape cells, that is the number one cells that people are standing and taking pictures of.
Yeah.
It's a mystery that people want to know what happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I forgot something we were talking about earlier, and it just came back in my head in regards to Whitey Bulger and talking about, you know, the government and not wanting to reveal information and stuff like that. What I found was interesting is after Whitey Bulger got out of Alcatraz, as we all know now, that, you know, he was working with he was like a CI for the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and his brother was I think he was a state rep.
Right.
Well, he was a judge, I believe, wasn't he?
He was a judge, and then he became a state rep in the Massachusetts legislature.
You know what I have been so thrilled about the book and what Whitey Bulger shared with me is that I never really thought or even knew how much of an involvement he was in this escape, and how fond he was of John and Clarence and Frank Morris. I mean, he spoke about them, how they were just like close friends.
Yeah. Did Art ever read any of those letters?
I have never shared those letters with Art. So the only people that have ever seen those letters is Mike, you and Cindy, and the people who read the book. So outside of that, no one else has ever read these letters.
Well, if it's in the book, I guess Art's seen them.
Yeah, but he didn't see them all. I mean, there are out of the 17 letters, we probably used, I don't know, what do you say, Mike? A couple of excerpts from it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very small excerpts because when Ken wrote the letters with Whitey for several years, he talked a lot about Alcatraz because Ken was asking pointed questions about what happened and his experiences, and he told all these stories that obviously we put in the book and we would show from the letters those stories. But he talked about a lot of other things, many other topics that related to his life growing up, about his life in under organized crime, his years of hiding, being rearrested,
his relationship with Mickey Cohen.
With Mickey Cohen, he was in MK Ultra. He talked about a lot. So those things aren't in the book because they're not directly related to Alcatraz. We only focused on the Alcatraz portion, so they're just little excerpts here and there.
Yeah,
it's just a fraction of the 17 letters that Ken has.
Got it.
And some of the stuff that he
17.
Yes, I have 17 letters, and some of the items that he sent me in these letters, like postcards and photos of him when he was in Acapulco, just all kind of strange things he just started sending to me. And I still to this day don't know why he sent me all this stuff. But I mean, he just became, I say a friend, but he came as close as a friend as you could have. Knowing what kind of a person he was.
You had
he kind of kept him at arm's length.
Listen, I did a documentary on bookies in Southie, and I was working with one of his cohorts, a guy named Pat Nee, and also Kevin Weeks, who was one of his.
He did speak about those two people.
Yeah, so I know I met both of those guys.
Yeah, the one thing though that I will say about Whitey, and I don't talk about him a whole lot, is that I did start seeing that, I guess back then, those criminals, they had like a code of conduct. The one thing that they considered to be the ultimate sin was to be a snitch.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. If you called him a snitch, he would probably want to, and he was out, he'd shoot you. Because that was like the nastiest word that you could apply to any of them. And so knowing that about him, I do not believe for one bit that he was a snitch for the FBI. I think they painted it on him because they knew by doing that it was going to draw other criminal people against him. And now, not only would the FBI be looking for him, now all of these other monsters would be looking for him because, you know, they considered him a rat and a snitch. So
Yeah.
And that was the one thing he told me he hated the most, that they painted on him.
Well, I think, you know, that I don't know about that, you know, because I've heard some stuff on the streets of Southie that kind of that counter that. Yeah.
Well, now he did say that he worked with the FBI, but he said what he was doing was he was using them.
Mm-hmm.
That he wasn't working for them; they were working for him.
I believe that.
So, I mean, in his mind, he didn't believe that what he was doing was ratting people out. He believed that he was using them, manipulating them like another of his counterparts would do.
Yeah, to his favor.
To his favor. You're exactly right.
Well, guys, another crazy, interesting one, you know, but hopefully people will have some answers for you soon on whether or not we're going to be able to take this stuff to your television screen. So keep your ears ready for that. But thanks, guys. And then we'll talk next week.
All right.
Good.